When you think of a police officer, you picture someone sworn to protect and serve, right? But what if that trust is shattered by those who misuse their badge for evil? Shocking as it may seem, there have been officers who abused their power, committing unimaginable crimes that left lasting scars on innocent lives. These are not the heroes we expect, but the villains hiding behind the uniform, causing harm when they were supposed to be the ones stopping it. These cases are some of the most disturbing stories you will ever hear. These officers didn't just break the law, they became the lawless. From corrupt dealings to horrific acts of violence, these individuals took advantage of the power they held. How could they betray the very people they were meant to protect? Let's explore the chilling details of 6 of the most evil police officers who have left a trail of destruction and heartbreak. Number 1, Stephen Caracappa and Luis Ippolito, NYPD. Stephen Caracappa and Luis Ippolito were once celebrated as detectives in the New York Police Department, but behind their badges was a dark secret. The 2 officers, known as the Mafia Cops, became infamous for their shocking connection to organized crime. For years, Caracappa and Ippolito worked as high-ranking detectives in the NYPD, but they were also secretly working for the mob. The pair were involved in a series of criminal activities, including helping the Lucchese crime family to carry out murders, extortions, and drug trafficking. In exchange for their services, they were paid handsomely, living luxurious lives while betraying their badge and the public trust. Caracappa and Ippolito's betrayal spanned over 2 decades. They were responsible for orchestrating the murders of at least 8 people, including mobsters, witnesses, and anyone else who posed a threat to the crime family's operations. They provided confidential police information to the mob and even participated in some of the murders themselves. Their actions went undetected for years due to their position of power and trust within the NYPD. It wasn't until 2005 that they were finally caught, convicted of multiple charges, and sentenced to life in prison. Their case remains one of the most shocking examples of police corruption and abuse of power. Number 2, Manuel Pardo. Manuel Pardo was a decorated police officer with the Miami-Dade Police Department, but his career took a sinister turn. Pardo's story is a chilling reminder of how someone trusted with upholding the law can spiral into becoming a cold-blooded killer. In the early 1980s, Pardo embarked on a brutal killing spree that spanned several months. He murdered at least 7 people, and many believe there were more victims whose deaths were never linked to him. What made Pardo's case even more disturbing was his justification for the killings. He claimed that his victims were drug dealers and criminals, as if his position as a police officer gave him the right to act as judge, jury, and executioner. Pardo's murders were not random. He carefully targeted his victims, including women and men he believed were involved in illegal activities. Despite his violent actions, he continued to wear his uniform, fooling both the public and his colleagues. It wasn't until 1986, when Pardo's crimes became known, that he was arrested and convicted for his actions. In 2012, after spending years on death row, Manuel Pardo was executed by lethal injection, leaving behind a trail of victims and a legacy of police corruption and evil. Number 3, Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin is one of the most infamous names in recent history, and his actions changed the world. In May 2020, Chauvin, a Minneapolis police officer, was filmed as he held his knee on the neck of George Floyd for over 9 minutes. The disturbing footage sparked a global movement, with millions of people demanding justice for Floyd and calling for an end to police brutality. Chauvin's actions were a clear violation of the law, and the public outrage was felt worldwide. George Floyd's death led to protests across the United States and around the world as people called for accountability and change. Chauvin's indifference to Floyd's suffering as well as his complete disregard for his duty as a police officer, shocked the world. He was found guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The case against Chauvin highlighted systemic issues within law enforcement, especially regarding racial inequality and the treatment of black individuals by police officers. His conviction brought some measure of justice for George Floyd's family, but the aftermath continues to reverberate, pushing for reforms in police practices worldwide. Number 4. Dennis Nilsen. Although not a police officer in the traditional sense, Dennis Nilsen, a former British civil servant, is often included in discussions of corrupt individuals within law enforcement due to his chilling story of abuse of power. Nilsen worked for the British Home Office in the 1970s and 1980s, but he is better known for his terrifying series of crimes as a serial killer. Nilsen's story is different from the others on this list. He was not part of the police force, but his job within government institutions and his connection to law enforcement authorities made his case just as sinister. Nilsen lured his victims into his home under the pretense of offering them shelter. He would then strangle them, keep their bodies for days, and engage in horrific acts of necrophilia. Nilsen confessed to killing 15 young men and boys, though many believe there were more victims. His case shocked Britain, and his role in taking advantage of vulnerable people, combined with his ability to evade detection for so long, made him one of the most terrifying figures in British criminal history. Nilsen's crimes were discovered in 1983, and he was convicted of multiple murders. He spent the rest of his life in prison, where he eventually died in 2018. Number 5. Ali Desai. Ali Desai was a prominent police officer in the United Kingdom, rising through the ranks of the Metropolitan Police to become one of the highest-ranking officers of Iranian descent. However, his career was tainted by corruption and criminal behavior that shocked the public. Desai's downfall began when he was accused of using his position to intimidate and manipulate people for personal gain. He was involved in a series of incidents that raised questions about his integrity, including accusations of abuse of power and dishonesty. But the most serious charges came in 2010 when Desai was convicted of misconduct in public office. He was found guilty of falsely arresting a man and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Desai was sentenced to 4 years in prison, and his case led to widespread public outrage. What makes Desai's case particularly troubling is the way he exploited his position of power within the police force. Despite his achievements and status, Desai's actions represented everything that is wrong with a system meant to serve the people. His case is a clear example of how some officers misuse their authority for personal gain. Number 6. Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph James DeAngelo, also known as the Golden State Killer, was a former police officer who committed a series of brutal crimes spanning over a decade. He was not only a criminal, but also a member of the very system meant to protect citizens. DeAngelo served as a police officer in the 1970s and 1980s, but while working for the Auburn and Exeter police departments, he was also living a double life as a serial rapist and murderer. His reign of terror began in 1976 and continued until 1986. He was responsible for at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and numerous burglaries. His ability to evade capture for so many years was largely due to his intimate knowledge of police procedures and tactics, which he had learned during his career. It wasn't until 2018 that DNA evidence finally led to his arrest. In 2020, DeAngelo pled guilty to multiple charges, including murder and rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case was a chilling reminder of how some law enforcement officers can use their training and position to carry out horrific crimes while staying under the radar for years. These 7 individuals represent the darkest side of law enforcement, where the very people entrusted with maintaining the peace become the ones causing the most harm. Their actions serve as a stark reminder that while most officers are dedicated to upholding the law, there are those who tarnish the badge with their evil deeds. What do you think about these cases? How do we ensure that something like this doesn't happen again? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth investigations into the most chilling crimes in history.